2 days before the lavish country club engagement party meant to seal 10 years of history together, Eugene dropped to one knee. Not to propose, he'd already done that 6 months ago with a flawless, blindingly expensive diamond, but to smooth the hem of Wendy's ivory silk dress. They were in the sun-drenched master bedroom of their luxury penthouse, the air humming with the quiet, expensive peace they had worked a decade to achieve. Then, Eugene's fingers drifted up, lightly tracing the curve of her ankle. "You know, Wendy," he murmured, his thumb catching against her skin. "I've never really seen you in stilettos. You have gorgeous arches." Wendy looked down at him, her reflection staring back from the floor to ceiling mirror. As a biotech firm's lead scientist, her daily uniform consisted of sensible loafers, sterile lab coats, and the occasional sleek, low-heeled pump for board meetings. "I can't stand them," she replied lightly, adjusting the waistline of her dress. "Walking in them feels like a medieval torture device. You should try them, the sky, high ones, with the iconic red soles," Eugene insisted, his hand sliding just a fraction higher up her calf, his eyes darkening with a sudden intense heat that felt entirely out of place. "The way they make a woman walk, swaying, teasing. You'd look absolutely devastating in a pair of red-soled stilettos for the party." Wendy froze. It was a microscopic shift in the atmosphere, the kind of subtle atmospheric drop that happens right before a tornado touches down. Eugene was a corporate attorney who billed $1,000 an hour. He knew about mergers, hostile takeovers, and vintage scotch. He didn't know the first thing about women's haute couture, let alone possess a deeply specific fantasy about red-soled designer heels. "Since when did you become a fashion critic?" Wendy asked, keeping her voice breezy, though a sudden, phantom chill crawled up her spine. Eugene's smile faltered. Just for a split second, his gaze darted away, breaking eye contact. "I flipped through a magazine in the dentist's waiting room, saw an ad. Just thought it would be sexy." He stood up swiftly, kissing her forehead. "I am going to grab a scotch. You want a sparkling water?" "Sure," she said softly. He walked out, leaving his tablet resting on the velvet armchair. For 10 years, Wendy had never been the snooping type. They had built this life from absolute scratch. She had vividly banked the memories of surviving on cheap ramen in a tiny, drafty studio apartment, working triple shifts at the university lab to help pay his law school tuition. They were a team. Trust was the bedrock of their entire existence. But a woman's intuition, especially a fiercely intelligent woman's, is a razor-sharp instrument. And right now, Wendy's internal alarms were practically deafening. She walked over and picked up the tablet. The passcode had been her birthday for the last 7 years. It unlocked instantly. She didn't dig through his texts. He was a lawyer. He knew how to delete a paper trail. Instead, Wendy opened the shared rideshare app. Her eyes narrowed as she scrolled past the usual trips to the courthouse and his downtown firm. Over the last 4 months, there was a glaring, recurring pattern. Every Tuesday and Thursday night, when he claimed to be bogged down in grueling deposition prep, there were rides taken to the heart of the city's neon, lit, ultra-trendy art district. Her heart began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. She switched to their joint banking app, diving into the archived credit card statements. There it was, dated exactly 1 week ago, a charge for $10,000 at an exclusive appointment, only luxury boutique downtown, a boutique notorious for selling strictly high-end designer shoes. Wendy sank onto the edge of the mattress, the plush material suddenly feeling like quicksand. She didn't cry. Instead, her scientific brain kicked into absolute overdrive, processing variables, isolating the data. A mysterious artsy neighborhood, a $10,000 shoe purchase, a sudden obsession with red-soled stilettos. She opened an anonymous social media account she used strictly for keeping up with industry biotech news and typed the name of the artsy district into the location search, referencing it with the boutique's tag. The algorithm, cruel and efficient, did the rest. Within 5 minutes, she was staring at the profile of a local influencer named Kristen. Kristen was 20-something, all hyper-plumped lips, cascading extensions, and a body practically poured into designer swimwear. Her feed was a relentless parade of yacht parties, VIP club tables, and shopping bags. She was the textbook definition of a woman who traded on her youth to be kept in luxury. Wendy's finger hovered over the screen. Her breath hitched, her lungs burning as if she'd forgotten how to exhale. She scrolled down to a post from exactly 7 days ago. It was an artfully blurred photo. The aesthetic was lazy Sunday morning seduction. A pair of endless, tanned legs tangled in high-thread count bedsheets, and dangling from one perfectly manicured toe was a brand new high stiletto with a glossy, unmistakable red sole. The caption was like a physical knife twisting right beneath Wendy's ribs. Spoiled by my favorite lawyer. So lucky to be his little secret. Thanks. The tablet slipped from Wendy's numb fingers, landing softly on the rug. Outside the bedroom door, she could hear the clinking of ice against crystal glass as the man she had loved for a decade poured himself a drink, completely unaware that his perfect, carefully constructed world had just been blown to ash. Eugene walked back into the bedroom, the ice in the twin crystal glasses chiming a cheerful, deceitful melody. He handed her a scotch, his smile relaxed, his conscience apparently completely unbothered by the fact that he was living a spectacular, expensive lie. Wendy took the glass. Her fingers were ice cold, but her hand didn't tremble. She took a slow sip, letting the amber liquid burn a path down her throat, cauterizing the open emotional wound before it could bleed. "Big day at the firm tomorrow?" she asked, her voice impossibly smooth. Eugene sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair she used to cut herself when they couldn't afford a barber. "Brutal. That corporate mediation is going to drag into the night. I probably won't be home until past midnight. I am sorry to leave you alone so close to the engagement party, babe." "Don't worry about me," Wendy smiled. It was a terrifying, flawless smile. "I have plenty to keep me occupied." By 10 a.m. the next morning, Wendy wasn't in her sterile high-tech laboratory. She was standing in the center of the exact downtown luxury boutique that hovered at the top of Eugene's hidden credit card statement. The air smelled of genuine leather, overpriced white tea, and exclusivity. A sleek sales associate approached, eyeing Wendy's understated trench coat and sensible flats with barely concealed condescension. "May I help you find something? Our seasonal collection just arrived." "The 5-inch patent stilettos with the painted red soles," Wendy said, her voice crisp and commanding. "I don't just want one pair. I want every single pair you have currently in stock, in every size." The associate froze, her polite smile slipping into genuine shock. "Ma'am, those retail for over $1,000 a pair to buy the entire inventory." Wendy didn't bother arguing. She simply opened her designer tote and slid her heavy brushed metal black card across the pristine glass counter. It was the card she had earned as the lead patent holder at a multi-million-dollar biotech firm. It was the card Eugene loved to casually mention to his colleagues to prove he was marrying an equal. "Ring them up and leave them in the boxes. I'm building a very specific collection." Watching the towering stack of glossy shopping bags accumulate wasn't an act of retail therapy. It was the methodical gathering of ammunition, because a scientist knows that to destroy a pathogen, you first have to isolate it. There is a vast difference between a hysterical tantrum and a clinical exorcism. Wendy didn't destroy his custom suits and memory foam out of a broken heart. She did it out of basic hygiene. Why keep a mattress compromised by a man-sized midlife crisis? Eugene thought he was pulling off a sophisticated double life. Wendy merely treated him like a biohazard cleanup, strict protocols, zero cross-contamination. That evening, the city was draped in a humid electric twilight. According to Kristen's obsessively updated Instagram stories, the influencer was attending an exclusive indie fashion show on the rooftop of a converted warehouse in the Arts District. The venue was vibrating with heavy, thumping bass. Wendy bypassed the velvet ropes with a quiet $100 bill to the bouncer and slipped into the shadows of the rooftop terrace. Dressed in a sharp, structured black blazer and dark lipstick, she blended perfectly into the sea of fashion insiders and trust fund kids. She didn't have to search for long. Kristen was holding court near a VIP cabana, bordered by ivy trellises, nursing a pink martini and vaping. Up close, the influencer was exactly as she appeared online, radiant, young, and vibrating with an unearned arrogance. Wendy positioned herself behind the thick leaves of the trellis, close enough to smell the overwhelming sweetness of Kristen's perfume. "So, where is he?" A blonde girl next to Kristen asked, glancing around. "I thought your lawyer sugar daddy was finally going to show his face." Kristen laughed, adjusting the strap of her dangerously low-cut silk top. "He is coming. He literally lied to his fiancée, told her he was locked in mediation, just so he could meet me here. Isn't he getting married, like, this weekend?" The friend sounded mildly impressed. "Oh, please, he's dreading it," Kristen sneered, taking a long drag from her vape. "He was venting to me last night. He said his fiancée is basically a walking spreadsheet. She is some uptight lab rat who practically funded his law degree, so now he feels obligated to marry her. He told me she has zero sex appeal, completely boring in bed. But the second I text him, Kristen snapped her manicured fingers. He comes running with his platinum card, begging for a taste of something real." Behind the trellis, the words hit Wendy like a physical blow to the stomach. A lab rat, obligated. Memories flashed behind her eyes in violent, rapid succession. The nights she stayed awake until 3 a.m. typing his law school papers because he was too exhausted. The time she sold her grandmother's pearl necklace to make rent so he wouldn't have to drop out. 10 years of absolute, unwavering devotion, reduced to a boring obligation by a man desperate to feel young again. For a fraction of a second, the grief threatened to shatter her. But Wendy was a woman who spent her life analyzing the weakest points of complex structures. The pain didn't break her. It hardened, crystallizing into a cold diamond, sharp, absolute fury. She didn't want him back. She wanted him annihilated. The heavy metal door leading to the rooftop suddenly groaned open. Eugene stepped out into the neon-lit night. He looked exactly as he had when he kissed her cheek that morning, wearing the custom, tailored navy suit she had bought him to celebrate his promotion. He spotted Kristen immediately. Wendy didn't gasp. She didn't cause a scene. She simply reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and switched the camera to 4K high-definition video. Her hands were as steady as a surgeon's as she zoomed in through the ivy. She watched through the screen as Eugene walked up to the woman who was a decade younger than him. He smiled, that boyish, charming smile he had weaponized against Wendy for years, and slipped his expensive cashmere jacket over Kristen's bare shoulders to ward off the chill. Then, Eugene pulled the influencer flush against his chest, his hands tangling in her extensions, and crushed his mouth against hers in a desperate, hungry kiss. The red recording icon on Wendy's screen blinked rhythmically in the dark, capturing every damning second of the lie. The evidence was secured. Now it was time to burn the laboratory to the ground. Wendy returned to the million-dollar penthouse. Shortly after 11 p.m., the silence inside was oppressive, heavy with the ghosts of a future that no longer existed. She didn't flick on the main lights, letting the city's neon glow paint sharp, bruised shadows across the imported hardwood floors. She dropped her trench coat over a chair and walked directly to the utility closet. When she emerged, her hands were wrapped around the matte black handles of a pair of heavy-duty fabric shears and a razor, sharp industrial box cutter. There was no wine poured, no dramatic music playing. Wendy was completely sober, her mind operating with the terrifying, icy clarity of a woman who had just realized she spent the last decade watering a dead plant. She walked into Eugene's custom walk-in closet. It was a shrine to his ego and his newly acquired wealth built entirely on the foundation she had financed. She started with the suits. Eugene's pride and joy was a row of 6 bespoke Italian silk blend suits, the ones he wore specifically to intimidate opposing counsel. Wendy didn't tear them off the hangers like a hysterical, dumped girlfriend. She pulled the fabric taut, aligned the shears with the precise, hand-stitched seams, and calmly began to cut. Snip-rip. The sound was shockingly loud in the quiet apartment. She cut away the lapels. She sliced through the expensive silk linings. She expertly severed the arms from the jackets. Thousands of dollars of tailored vanity fell to the floor in useless, jagged ribbons of navy, charcoal, and black. Next was his prized golf bag leaning against the wall, the titanium clubs he dragged around to woo senior partners. Wendy wedged the shafts against the heavy oak frame of the closet door and leaned her weight into them. The sharp, satisfying crack of the metal snapping echoed like a gunshot. She broke every single one, tossing the bent, useless pieces into the center of the plush rug. But the closet was just the prelude. The real desecration happened where the betrayal lived. Wendy walked into the master bedroom and stood at the foot of their sprawling California king bed. It was the same mattress where he had laid his head next to hers, whispering promises of forever. And she knew with sickening certainty it was the same mattress he likely brought Kristen to when Wendy was working late at the lab. She gripped the box cutter. With a deep, steadying breath, she drove the blade into the center of the expensive memory foam. She dragged it out towards the edges, ripping through the high thread count sheets and the thick mattress protector, exposing the white foam underneath like open flesh. She sliced, turning the bed into a shredded, ruined mess of stuffing and fabric. There is a vast difference between a hysterical tantrum and a clinical exorcism. Wendy didn't destroy his custom suits and memory foam out of a broken heart. She did it out of basic hygiene. Why keep a mattress compromised by a man-sized midlife crisis? Eugene thought he was pulling off a sophisticated double life. Wendy merely treated him like a biohazard cleanup, strict protocols, zero cross-contamination. It was violent. It was necessary. It was an emotional exorcism that left her hands slick with sweat, but fundamentally lighter. The oppressive weight of a decade's worth of obligation lifted from her shoulders with every brutal motion. When she was finished, the penthouse looked like a crime scene committed against luxury. The wreckage of Eugene's life was scattered everywhere. She didn't pack her own things. She had already arranged for movers to quietly clear out her lab equipment and essential clothes the next day while he was at work. Tonight, she was leaving almost everything behind. She was wealthy in her own right. She didn't need to fight over a television or a sofa. She wanted him to keep this ruined space as a monument to his colossal stupidity. Wendy walked into the pristine kitchen and grabbed one final item before she left. From the towering stack of glossy boutique bags she had purchased that morning, she selected a single glittering stiletto with a perfectly painted crimson sole. Dawn broke over the city, casting long, pale streaks of light through the panoramic windows. The digital clock on the bedside table read 6 a.m., the heavy front door clicked. As the deadbolt turned, Eugene walked in, looking exactly like a man who had spent the night rolling around with a 20-something influencer. His tie was loose, his shirt slightly wrinkled, smelling faintly of stale smoke and expensive, sickeningly sweet perfume. "Wendy?" he called out, his voice thick with fake exhaustion. "Babe, I am so sorry. Mediation ran all night. I slept on the sofa in my office." He turned the corner into the hallway, expecting to find his reliable, docile fiancée dutifully steaming her dress for the engagement party that evening. Supposedly a boring woman who would accept his lie without question. Instead, he stepped directly into a war zone. He stared blankly at the shredded remnants of his Italian suits spilling out of his closet. His gaze dropped to his shattered titanium golf clubs. His jaw went completely slack, his perfectly manicured lawyer fafaye crumbling in real time. Before he could even process the destruction, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Eugene barely had time to turn his head before a glossy, heavy object flew across the room, an absolute missile of weaponized femininity. It smashed squarely into his chest with enough force to knock the breath entirely out of his lungs. He staggered back against the wall, clutching his ribs. He looked down at the object that had just assaulted him. Lying on the shattered remains of his life was a single sky. High, aggressively red-soled stiletto. Eugene stared at the red-soled shoe on the floor, his breath coming in short, panicked rasps. He looked up, his eyes darting frantically around the ruined penthouse until they locked onto the entryway of the master bedroom. Wendy stepped out of the shadows. She wasn't crying, she wasn't wearing her sensible loafers or her understated lab coats. She was dressed in a sharp, tailored crimson power suit that mirrored the bottom of the stiletto currently resting by Eugene's Italian leather Oxfords. Her hair fell in sleek, perfect waves. She looked completely, terrifyingly untouchable. "Have a good mediation, Eugene?" she asked, her voice as crisp and cold as liquid nitrogen. Panic flashed in Eugene's eyes, swiftly followed by the slick, defensive anger of a man cornered. He puffed out his chest, falling back on the instinct that made him a ruthless attorney: deny, deflect, attack. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he roared, gesturing wildly at the shredded master bedroom. "Have you completely lost your mind, Wendy? You need psychiatric help. You tore up my suits. You destroyed a $5,000 mattress." "Oh, it is a tragic loss," Wendy agreed mildly, walking slowly toward the kitchen island. "But honestly, the mattress was compromised. You see, as a scientist, I have a very strict zero-tolerance policy for cross-contamination. I didn't want whatever cheap perfume or STDs you've been picking up in the arts district ruining my sleep hygiene." Eugene froze. The false bravado evaporated instantly, leaving behind a pathetic ashen husk. I don't know what you are talking about. I was at the office, save the courtroom theatrics." "Eugene, you are off the clock," Wendy interrupted, picking up the remote control from the marble counter. "And frankly, your performance is insulting to my intelligence." She pointed the remote at the massive 80-inch smart television mounted on the living room wall. It clicked to life instantly. The crisp 4K video she had taken hours ago filled the screen. There was Eugene, wrapped in the neon rooftop light, pulling Kristen into his chest. The audio was crystal clear, the thumping bass, the rustle of clothing, the undeniable sound of their breathless kiss. Eugene's mouth opened and closed like a dying fish, all his legal arguments, his silver-tongued excuses, asphyxiated in his throat. He stared at the screen, watching his own infidelity loop on the television he had bought with her money. "You told her I was a walking spreadsheet," Wendy said quietly, leaning against the counter. "You told her I was a lab rat. You said you were obligated to marry me." "Wendy, please," Eugene's voice cracked. He took a step toward her, his hands raised in surrender. "It meant nothing. She means nothing. It was just a stupid, midlife crisis ego boost. She's dumb, she's shallow. She's also very vocal on social media," Wendy noted calmly. "But that's beside the point. You didn't just break my heart, Eugene. You insulted my return on investment. I spent 10 years building you. I bought those suits. I financed your education. I gave you the polished, respectable life you so desperately craved, and you thought you could just siphon off my resources to play sugar daddy to a 22-year-old? Eugene dropped to his knees. The $1,000 and whore corporate shark was suddenly reduced to a trembling mess amidst the wreckage of his golf clubs. "I'll do anything, please, Wendy. The engagement party is tonight. The senior partners are coming. My parents are flying in. If we cancel it now, the embarrassment." He choked back a sob. "I will spend the rest of my life making this up to you. Just don't cancel the party." Wendy looked down at him. A slow, terrifyingly beautiful smile spread across her face. "Cancel the party?" she echoed softly. "Eugene, why would I ever do that?" He looked up, a spark of desperate hope igniting in his tear-filled eyes. You are not canceling." "No," Wendy said, setting the remote down. "In fact, I upgraded the event. I called the country club event coordinator at 3A. I told them we needed 2 additional projectors for an unexpected milestone montage. I also added 3 names to the VIP guest list." Eugene's blood ran cold. The hope in his eyes turned into absolute paralyzing terror. What did you do, Wendy? You wanted to show off your life. You wanted to play the high-rolling lawyer." Wendy stepped closer, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Tonight, you get to do exactly that. Your senior partners will be there. Your parents will be there. And when it's time for the champagne toast, everyone is going to watch a highly curated presentation of your extracurricular activities." "You can't do this," Eugene scrambled up from the floor, his face pale with horror. "You'll ruin me. The firm has a strict morality clause for partners, my family." "Oh, and I almost forgot," Wendy added, ignoring his panic. "I sent an Uber Black to a specific address in the Arts District. Kristen is on her way to the country club right now. I figured since you bought her that $10,000 pair of shoes, she'd love an occasion to wear them." She walked past him, heading toward the front door. "Wendy, wait, please." Eugene lunged forward, grabbing her wrist. With a swift clinical motion she had learned in a self-defense class years ago, Wendy twisted her arm, breaking his grip effortlessly. She stared into his panicked eyes, allowing the last decade of her love for him to finally, permanently sever. "Be at the country club by 7, Eugene," she said, her voice echoing in the ruined hallway. "Don't be late for your own funeral." The heavy mahogany door clicked shut behind her, leaving Eugene alone in his devastated sanctuary, waiting for the executioner's block. The Oak Room at the Wellington Country Club was a masterclass in understated old money elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over the imported orchids, and a live string quartet played a flawless rendition of Vivaldi in the corner. Waiters in crisp white tuxedos glided through the crowd, balancing silver trays of vintage Dom Perignon. It was the perfect setting for a high society execution. Wendy stood near the ice sculpture, nursing a glass of sparkling water. She had swapped her crimson power suit for a breathtaking floor-length emerald silk gown. It clung to her perfectly, making her look less like a devastated fiancée and more like a reigning monarch. Across the room, Eugene was sweating through his the rack emergency suit, a noticeable downgrade from his usual Italian silk. He looked like a man standing on a trapdoor with the noose already fitted. He kept darting anxious glances at the massive velvet, draped projector screens flanking the main stage. Arthur Pendleton, the notoriously strict senior managing partner of Eugene's law firm, was holding court near the bar. Eugene's parents, Eleanor and Richard, were hovering around Arthur, laughing a bit too loudly at his jokes, desperate to secure their son's social standing. "Eugene looks terrible," Eleanor muttered, adjusting her diamond necklace as she walked over to Wendy. She gave Wendy's emerald dress a tight, assessing smile. "And you? Well, green is certainly a choice for your own engagement party. Did Eugene forget to book a stylist?" "Green felt appropriate tonight, Eleanor," Wendy replied smoothly, her smile not reaching her eyes. "It is the color of new beginnings and cold, hard cash." Eleanor blinked, unsure how to respond to the sudden edge in the usually docile scientist's voice. Before she could press the issue, a murmur rippled through the grand double doors of the ballroom. Kristen had arrived. She stood in the archway looking wildly out of place, in a dangerously sheer cut-out sequin dress that practically screamed for Instagram attention. On her feet were the glossy red, soled stilettos Wendy had left for Eugene. The influencer scanned the room, looking confused by the conservative, upper-crust crowd until her eyes landed perfectly on Eugene. Eugene's face drained of all remaining color. He looked like he might actually vomit into a nearby potted fern. "Eugene, babe," Kristen called out. Pushing past a cluster of horrified junior partners, she reached him, oblivious to the icy stares. "What is this place? You told the Uber driver to drop me here for a surprise. Is this a corporate thing?" Eugene grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into bare skin. "Kristen, you need to leave right now. You can't be here." "Why?" Kristen frowned, yanking her arm back. "You practically begged me to see you last night. You bought me these shoes." "Oh, actually, I bought those." A clear, amplified voice echoed through the ballroom. The room went dead silent. The string quartet floundered to a halt. Every head snapped toward the stage. Wendy was standing in the center, a silver microphone held loosely in her manicured hand. The stage lights hit her, making the emerald dress shimmer like liquid glass. "Good evening, everyone," Wendy said, her voice projecting with calm, absolute authority. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this milestone. Eugene and I have been together for 10 years, a decade. In that time, I've learned a lot about the man standing before you." Eugene took a step forward, his hands raised in a pathetic, silent plea. "Don't," Wendy smiled down at him. "Watch me. When we decided to host this event, I wanted to put together a special presentation, a montage, if you will, to truly showcase Eugene's character, his dedication, and the sheer amount of overtime he puts in, even when he's supposed to be in corporate mediation." Wendy didn't wait. She simply snapped her fingers at the audio, visual tech in the back booth. The heavy velvet curtains over the two gigantic projector screens retracted, the lights dimmed. For a split second, there was darkness. Then, the screens exploded into vivid, 4K high-definition reality. There was Eugene on the rooftop, The heavy thumping bass of the indie club blasted through the country club's state of the art surround sound system. The high society crowd gasped as one collective entity as Eugene wrapped his arms around Kristen, burying his hands in her extensions, and delivered a desperate, hungry kiss. The audio was horrifyingly clear. The wet smack of the kiss. Kristen's giggling. "You told her I was in mediation." "The screen," Kristen asked. "She is a walking spreadsheet. I have to marry the lab rat. But I need something real." "Screen," Eugene replied, panting. The video looped. And looped again. Pandemonium broke out in the elegant oak room. "Good God, Eugene!" Arthur Pendleton boomed, his face purple with rage. He slammed his champagne flute onto a passing tray. "A walking spreadsheet. Have you lost your mind? The morality clause in your partnership track. Idiot, to do this so publicly." Eugene's mother gasped, clutching her chest as if she had been shot. "Eugene, with a strumpet! Who are you calling a strumpet?" Kristen shrieked, finally connecting the dots. She whirled on Eugene, her acrylic nails flashing. "You told me you were breaking up with her? You didn't tell me this was your engagement party? You used me to cheat on the woman buying all your stuff." Smack! Kristen slapped Eugene so hard across the face that the sound rivaled the crack of the shattered golf clubs. She spun on her red-soled heels and stormed out of the ballroom, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and righteous fury in her wake. Eugene stood alone in the center of the room, clutching his glowing red cheek, surrounded by the disgusted stares of his colleagues, his bosses, and his family. The polished, golden life he had so meticulously built was in absolute ruins. On the stage, Wendy calmly placed the microphone on the podium. She walked down the steps, moving through the parted crowd like Moses splitting the Red Sea. No one dared speak to her. No one dared look her in the eye. They were terrified of the woman who held the power to scorch the earth so elegantly. She stopped in front of Eugene. He was openly weeping now, his shoulders shaking. "You ruined me," he choked out, barely a whisper. "No, Eugene," Wendy said softly, the scientific detachment finally complete. "I just provided the peer review. You provided the data." Never bring a sloppy lie to a lead scientist. Eugene truly believed his law degree made him the smartest operator in the room. He forgot that the woman who financed his arrogance knew exactly how to liquidate it. She didn't argue, and she certainly didn't scream. She simply presented his raw data to his senior partners and let gravity handle the rest. It was a flawless thesis defense. With smooth precision, she slid the massive 3-carat diamond ring off her left hand. She didn't throw it at him. She elegantly dropped it into his half-empty flute of lukewarm champagne. The diamond sank heavily to the bottom, clinking against the crystal. "Keep the ring, pay off your broken mattress," Wendy whispered. She turned her back on him, the emerald silk of her gown sweeping across the floor, and walked out the grand double doors into the crisp, cool night. For the first time in 10 years, the air smelled entirely fresh, and the world was entirely hers. 18 months later, the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in New York was a far cry from the Wellington Country Club tonight. There were no strings attached to archaic societal expectations, and certainly no off-the-rack apologies. Tonight was about innovation, power, and capital. Wendy stood at the podium, bathed in the flashing lights of industry photographers. She wasn't wearing emerald green tonight. She wore a razor-sharp, custom-tailored white Alexander McQueen suit. It was immaculate, unforgiving, and completely devoid of anyone else's baggage. Behind her, the massive digital screen bore the logo of her newly minted biotech startup, Aura Therapeutics, alongside a headline that had just broken in the Wall Street Journal that morning. Former lead researcher secures $50 million in series of funding. For a long time, I treated my life the way I treated my research, Wendy said out to the crowd, her voice carrying the smooth, confident cadence of a woman who owned the room. I invested in variables I thought were stable. I poured resources into projects, hoping for a specific yield. But the greatest scientific breakthrough I ever made was realizing that the most profitable investment you can ever make is in yourself. The ballroom erupted into thunderous applause. Investors, tech billionaires, and industry titans raised their glasses to her. As she stepped down from the stage, her lead investor, a sharp-eyed venture capitalist named Marcus, handed her a flute of vintage Krug champagne. "Brilliant speech, Wendy," Marcus smiled, clinking his glass against hers. "You've got the whole East Coast talking. By the way, my legal team finished the final patent transfers across all jurisdictions. The firm handled it beautifully." "Which firm did you use again?" Wendy asked casually. Taking a sip, Pendleton and Associates. "They're the best in the city," Marcus replied. Wendy's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. "Pendleton, Arthur Pendleton's firm. They are very efficient," Wendy agreed, her eyes gleaming with quiet amusement. "I am quite familiar with their zero-tolerance morality policies." It was an inside joke only she could fully appreciate. She already knew exactly what had happened to Eugene. News traveled fast in her old circles. After the disastrous country club engagement party, Arthur Pendleton had unceremoniously fired Eugene by 9 a.m. the next morning. The public humiliation, combined with the absolute breach of the firm's strict partnership morality clause, had rendered Eugene radioactive in the corporate law world. His parents, horrified by the social scandal, had cut his financial safety net, retreating to their vacation home in Florida to hide from the country club gossip. The last Wendy had heard through the grapevine, the once high-rolling Eugene was now working at a gloomy strip mall personal injury law firm in the suburbs. He spent his days chasing minor fender benders and drafting cease and desist letters for noisy neighbors. He no longer wore bespoke Italian silk. He wore shiny, cheap-off, the rack polyester, and Kristen, she had blocked him on every platform before her Uber, even left the Wellington parking lot that night. Eugene was a deleted file, a bad variable she had successfully scrubbed from her data set. "Shall we head to the after party?" Marcus asked, offering her his arm. "Your chauffeured car is waiting outside." "Let's," Wendy said. She walked through the opulent lobby of the plaza, the glass doors held open for her by a smiling porter. The crisp autumn air of Manhattan swept over her, smelling of expensive possibilities. As she stepped off the curb and into the waiting black Maybach, the streetlights caught the flash of her footwear. She wasn't wearing sensible loafers. She wasn't wearing sneakers. Wendy stepped into her future in a pair of towering high stilettos, the soles painted a perfect, victorious, merciless red. Let's talk about the phrase, a walking spreadsheet. Men like Eugene love to build their bespoke. Luxury lives on the back of a woman's quiet, unglamorous sacrifices. But the exact moment they secure the corner office, your steadfast loyalty suddenly becomes an obligation. They label you boring because your stability is a cold mirror, reflecting their own profound lack of substance. Wendy's brilliance wasn't just in the grand finale, it was in her instant clarity. She didn't waste a single breath trying to prove she was sexier, louder, or more fun than a 22-year-old influencer. She didn't negotiate her worth. She simply realized she was the bank, and she foreclosed on his entire existence. When a man calls you a spreadsheet, you don't cry. You simply show him the absolute zero at the bottom of his ledger. Have you ever been penalized for being the reliable one? Did you ever fund a man's potential, only to watch him spend the profits on a walking cliché? How did you cut his funding? I'll be reading and taking notes. Madam, read out.